Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
If you love freedom,
as government expands, liberty contracts.
If you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
And welcome back. This is Upfront Outspoken. Of course, I'm your host, Bob Williams, with you here on this TGIF. What can I tell you? Going to be a very interesting hour, or just about an hour. I have via Skype, I have Jonathan Wolfman, author activist, and author Arjuna Krishna from Spain. But before I bring them on, there's a couple of things I want to air here so you people all have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. It's about a 3-minute segment, and what can I tell you? It's going to be interesting.
Senator from California.
This is what the summary of the 6,000 pages look like. Let me now turn to the contents of the study. The CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques were not an effective way to gather intelligence information. The CIA provided extensive amounts of inaccurate information about the operation of the program and its effectiveness to the White House, the Department of Justice, Congress, the CIA Inspector General, the media, and the American public. The CIA's management of the program was inadequate and deeply flawed. The CIA program was far more brutal than people were led to believe. This involved non-stop interrogation and abuse. They were deprived of sleep for days. In one case, up to 180 hours, kept in complete darkness. The detainee was grabbed from his cell, clothes cut off, hooded, and dragged up and down a dirt hallway while being slapped and punched. CIA officers often called into question the effectiveness of the CIA's interrogation techniques, but these contradictions were marginalized and not presented externally. Due to poor record keeping, a full accounting of how many specific detainees were held and how they were specifically treated while in custody may never be known. We submit this study on behalf of the committee to the public in the belief that it will stand the test of time, and with it the report will carry the message, never again.
All right, now I want to bring in my panel, and that includes Arjuna Krishna in... We're getting a buzz here somewhere. Arjuna, we're going to be bringing him in, and also Jonathan Wolfman. I'm glad you guys took the time out to join me this morning.
Well, good morning.
Now, Jonathan, you've heard, and Arjuna, you both heard that 2-minute clip. And I want to get your impressions about it. Arjuna, let's start with you first.
Hello there. It's Arjuna Krishna-Das.
Okay, Arjuna, you had the opportunity, I hope, to hear that 2-minute segment. What is your take on from what Senator Feinstein said?
Well, she's exactly right. In summary, she can't begin to get into the detail of the horror of what actually went on in such a short clip. But I did download the actual report myself this morning and just have a look at the executive summary points. And it couldn't really be more damning. This has been a complete train wreck of a non-policy, not thought out, not implemented with any clear goals and measurements and accountability, lied about, unduly cruel, employed a pair of rogue psychologists and paid them tens of millions for drowning people, keeping them awake for over a week. People would say anything under those circumstances, and even if you say the end justifies the means, and we're as bad as the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, it didn't actually produce any useful information. It produced misinformation. It couldn't be worse. You can't. It's like fighting for women's rights by raping women.
Now, Jonathan, what was your take on that?
Well, that's precisely my take. You know, the people who are defending it, look at the people who are defending it. These are the same crowd who failed to get bin Laden for how many years? 11 years. 10, 11 years. They failed. They failed miserably. And now we know why they failed miserably. Now we know why George Bush, in a public statement late in his tenure, said, oh, we're not that really interested in getting bin Laden. Well, you know why? Because they had to know in their guts that what they were doing, all these great architects of this nonsense, what they were doing was floundering around and allowing the lowest members of the CIA and probably paid rogues to do whatever in hell they wanted, as brutally as they felt at the moment necessary, as Arjuna said, with no overall direction or goal. Of course we didn't get bin Laden. Of course it wasn't effective. And let me just say one thing more here. You know, the Israelis have been the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, their CIA. They have been lobbying with the CIA to give up torture since the late 80s. Why? Not because Jews or Israelis are so much more enlightened than anyone else. Of course not. It's because they are on the front lines of dealing with Muslim terrorists all the time, long before Americans were so concerned about Muslim terrorists. And you know what the Mossad was telling every one of our CIA directors? It doesn't work. Torture doesn't work. People will say any damn thing in the world to get it to stop.
Now, I may be the hawk in this conversation, and I'm going to be very specific here. I am a firm believer that whatever tactics, short of killing your interrogee, we need to get the information so we avoid another 9/11. We avoid another Benghazi. We avoid embassies being blown up.
I've got you there, Jan. Let's take the devil's advocate position that in order to stop another 9/11, which incidentally is practically happening every month on a distributed scale right at this moment, in order to stop this kind of atrocity from occurring again, we must use every means necessary to stop it in our treatment of captured jihadists. However, the first point of the report's conclusions are the CIA's use of its enhanced interrogation techniques was not an effective means of acquiring intelligence or gaining cooperation from detainees. So you can say, well, we will use whatever means necessary, but they used whatever means necessary to produce disinformation and failure. They didn't.
The problem, that's exactly right. The problem here isn't so much.
Have been relatively successful in stopping another major 9/11 in the 14 years since, but it's not been through these enhanced interrogation techniques.
Okay, Jonathan, go ahead and say.
People.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have stepped on Arjuna there, but let me just say this. I think the point here is not so much that Arjuna and I are articulating a position saying, oh, let's be nice guys, let's hold their hands. We're not saying that at all, people. What we're saying is those techniques just bloody don't work.
Okay, so here's my question to both of you, and then, like I said, I'm very hawkish when it comes to getting this information that's going to save human lives. So my question is to you, Jonathan, what would you consider while I agree with the report in the fact that using these enhanced torture methods provided a huge amount of misinformation, what techniques would you use? I mean, you can't just take a terrorist, read him his civil rights that we have, that we're right here, and expect him to give this information up. Where do we go?
Well, no, I don't think it's either or. I don't think that anybody has suggested, the Senate committee, nor Arjuna nor I have suggested that you treat a terrorist suspect the way you would a robbery suspect in an American police station or in an American court of law. These are combatants. There's no question about that. But do not we have handbooks that show how, for our interrogators, to show interrogators how to go after these people in very clear and tough interrogation? There has to be something other than saying, "Sweetie pie, would you like another piece of cake?" Somewhere between that and dragging somebody's butt across a floor until there are welts and then force feeding them through their rectum, which is what the report suggested. There's got to be a middle ground that is in fact effective when we already know that feeding a man through his forced feeding through his rectum in fact does not give you intelligence. I will say this again. Yes, we all are tempted to say, what if there is another 9/11 coming? Do we do something? Yeah, of course we do something. But the point is, these guys who are now defending those techniques, did they catch bin Laden? No. Why? Not because bin Laden was so elusive. My God, he was staying in his little self-made palace the whole damn time.
He was next to the intelligence services.
Yes, right, 30 minutes from the Pakistani West Point. The reason we didn't get them was because those methods simply made the people who architected those methods feel good and tough, but they didn't get the information.
Arjuna, go ahead. You were saying something.
Yeah, I mean, Jan, let's just lay out how the Geneva Convention works. I grew up, I'm half Welsh, half German, and I grew up on a diet of 70s and 80s war films and series like Colditz, where you have a war which Islam has clearly, or jihadist Islam, Orthodox Islam, has clearly declared on the West in an unarguable way. The West has simply failed to acknowledge we are at war with Orthodox jihadist Islam and treat jihadists accordingly. And that is, according to the Geneva Convention, putting them in prisoner of war camps, saying, well, you can talk or you cannot talk. If your case is that you are innocent, then talk. Explain why you are innocent, and we will listen to you. If you do not wish to talk, you will be imprisoned for the duration of the war. It's that simple, and you will be afforded all the privileges that we afford in a non-reciprocal way, because we know that you just behead our prisoners, but we, because we are in the moral right, will not torture you. We will keep you in a prisoner of war camp until we deem this war to be won.
But here's my question then. Aren't you, by doing that, are you or are you not saying to these guys, okay, we're going to put you in a prisoner of war camp, in this situation, and you're basically, you're giving these guys a carte blanche to continue with the activity, and we have no means to prevent it by just saying, okay, we're going to put you in prison, we're going to let you rot there.
Because the real answer does not lie in discovering plots and interrogating jihadists and imprisoning jihadists. The real intelligence does not lie in the interrogations. The real intelligence lies in things like understanding who are our allies. Turkey is clearly not our ally. Pakistan is clearly not our ally. Iran can clearly not be trusted, with a word that it says about its nuclear ambitions. We need to understand who our friends and enemies are, and look at possibly one of the most successful Muslim majority countries in the world, which is Morocco. And it has a shared system of government between a long-established monarchy and, to some degree, a democracy. And this is the kind of model which we need to see across the Islamic world, where you have a balance of power between a monarchy and democracy, because a democracy is clearly unsuitable where you have a population like Pakistan, where every school teaches jihad as the highest aim of life.
Yeah, but that still comes back to the point I was trying to make. What do you put into this void in order to retrieve vital information that will protect? Well, even let's say somebody went over there, bombed the palace in Spain, or took out,
Okay, here's what I'd say. Whatever the British police are doing at the moment in keeping the lid on major terrorist operations by intercepting electronic communications, monitoring social media, spying on mosques, whatever they're doing is keeping the lid on it. And I believe that they are not interrogating British Muslim jihadists in British prisons at the moment. So I would say that level of intelligence and investigation is working. But obviously, if the number of jihadists continue, then we have a problem maintaining that level of civilized investigation.
Let me interject one thing here first, Jonathan, and I'll get you right in here. So in other words, what we're getting is that MI5, which is the Secret Service or the intelligence of Britain, and the CIA, they're basically being, I know I shouldn't use the CIA in this, but let's just leave with MI5, is that, we're going to monitor everything electronically and hope for the best. And sometimes that doesn't work. So, if a individual who is plotting this and he is getting orders from elsewhere, what do we do? I mean, we can't just sit there and play patty cake with these people.
Jan, you're looking at it entirely from the wrong perspective, okay? Imagine, right, if I can just indulge you for a moment, imagine that the world population of Muslims, right, is the manure in Bricktop's pig farm in Snatch, okay? So all the Muslims in the world are represented by a huge amount of pig excrement, okay? Now Bricktop deals with this pig excrement by putting it in leaking cesspits, and then you get bursts of methane gas exploding randomly out of these cesspits, okay? Now the conventional way of dealing with this is Bricktop just shrugs his shoulders and he goes, accidents happen. And if people complain about it, he goes, feed them to the pigs, Harold. Now, the proper way of dealing with the Muslim population, the pig excrement, is not to put them in these leaking cesspits. It's to put them in a properly managed permaculture ecosystem with sustainable inputs and outputs and everything in harmony. In other words, a sensible ideology like Buddhism or Christianity. So you have to attack this on the ideological and cultural and theological front, because all you're doing by dealing with the intelligence and the known terrorists is just trying to work out where the next burst of methane is going to explode. You need to deal with what's causing the methane.
I would also say that what you're not hearing from the people who are so outraged at the committee's report, what you're not hearing from them is that before all these atrocities, and they are atrocities, took place, we were getting information from people we've captured on the field. We were getting information through the more traditional techniques of interrogation. And I would point out, I think I'm going to have to keep pointing this out to people. People say, yes, but what if, you know what? It didn't get us bin Laden. Those techniques failed. Why in hell do Americans, and I imagine others too, but I'm an American, so I'll say this. I'll ask this question. Why in hell do Americans think that just by being brutal, you're being effective? You're not. Let me turn the question around. I'll put it this way. Had those techniques had anything to them other than getting jollies for the people sitting back in comfortable offices in Washington knowing that it was going on, had there been any benefit other than guys like Dick Cheney feeling all tough, we would have gotten bin Laden in 04, 05, 06. What they can't stand is, frankly, that Barack Obama got him.
Comment, Arjuna?
The jihadists believe that they are performing a holy activity that although it looks bad, the end justifies the means, and the end is obedience. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The way to deal with jihadists is not through snippets of information about the next attack they're planning, and those attacks are getting more and more distributed. We're seeing the change from an iTunes method of distributing music or jihad to a peer-to-peer file sharing means of jihad, where everybody just shares the instructions to cause mayhem. This is how you build a bomb, this is how you go about a terror attack, here's some training manual, and people just doing it in smaller and smaller numbers. So the ability of the security services to detect large plots is going to be really negated by the next form of asymmetric warfare. The way to attack this asymmetric warfare is not by trying to discover this guy's looking a bit dodgy here on Facebook, he says he wants to behead all the infidels. No, it's by attacking this stupid motto they have, that Allah is the only God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. Actually, Allah bears all the hallmarks, as described in the Quran, of Satan. And I'm not some fundamentalist Christian, sort of very intense religious person. I do believe in a God. I'm a Krishna follower, and I am mainly a very peaceful person. But when I come across this fallacy of a religion, it really does look like, if Allah is their God, then it's Satan, really. And we're fighting against, an organization which is really based on the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is its hub. And they say, God is our objective, the Quran is our constitution, the Prophet is our leader, jihad is our way, death for the sake of God is our wish. Well, look, Muhammad, Allah, the Quran, Islam is at the heart of exactly what they believe in, and they believe in death for themselves or for others. They don't care. For a different brand of Muslims, whoever, death, blow up, and get your celestial paradise with your permanent erection with which to service your 72 virgins and whoever else, whatever else gorgeous looking goats come by your way, or raisin like young boys. That's what it's all about. We have to attack this at its very root. Islam is shit.
Jonathan.
Well, I'm not going to weigh in on whether Islam or any other religion is shit, but I am going to say that what is striking about the report is that nothing in that report was that we are so exercised over now, whether we're defending it in an exercised way or whether we're condemning it. Nothing that was done in the name of you, Bob, or me as Americans. Nothing that was in that report that was done in our names as Americans was effective in getting the top level of Al-Qaeda and the people who threw down those towers and who killed my student's dad at the Pentagon.
Nothing. The thing is, while the report is very damning, and I do not agree with a lot of the techniques that they use, but as a former...
Which techniques do you agree with, John?
What I agree with is if you deprive a person of some sleep, and I'm not going to say 180 hours like they said.
140 hours is mentioned in the report.
Right, I don't.
They're hallucinating.
I don't condone that.
You just did.
No. I said I do not condone the 180 hours. That's what I said. I said while
that's a little of
right,
withdrawal sleep.
Yeah,
okay.
You can limit it. You can limit it, and I want to make this point very clear. I myself served in the United States Army during the Vietnam War period, and granted, John McCain, Senator McCain, he was a POW. He was held in Hanoi. He went through the experience of torture. He knows what it's like. But there are methods, and we used them. To get results when we were in Vietnam. Now, I don't condone waterboarding. I don't condone the fact of making a person freeze to death. I don't condone that, but I do condone certain areas of interrogation methods to get information, because if applied correctly, and I'm going to put it that way, if applied correctly, you can get useful information out of an opposing enemy.
I agree. There is a level of violence which is reasonable. And I'm just searching for something about that.
Jonathan, you want to weigh in while he's doing that?
I guess I would agree. No one is asking you to use, the old expression, kid gloves on avowed terrorists. All I want is something that is effective, that is going to get you, more times than not, actionable information that will save Western lives. I want information that will save American and other Western lives. And I want to know that the representatives of my government are using methods that are more likely to get life-saving information for me, my family, you and yours, as opposed to just making guys like Dick Cheney all jolly back in his office. It just doesn't make sense.
Can I give an example, John? A real-life example of something that happened recently on the Costa del Sol.
Go ahead.
It's how do disputes get solved without the rule of law round here? There's a few guys I know, and they're involved in some less than legal businesses. So there's a guy we'll call Tony. He's a businessman from England. He lives here on the Costa del Sol in Andalusia, and he brokes coke and weed. So a known customer, Eric, asked Tony to supply Eric's friends, some Spanish guys we'll call the Dickwits, for reasons which will become apparent. The Dickwits wanted a kilo of weed on tick for a week or two while they sold it on. Now Tony explained to Eric he didn't know the Dickwits from Adam, so Eric would have to take full responsibility for any cock-ups on their part. Eric agreed, and Tony arranged for delivery of the weed. So a few days later, Eric called Tony in some consternation, because it appeared the Dickwits were about to scarper. So Tony reiterated that this was actually Eric's problem, and went round to visit the Dickwits with Eric and a few friends. Now Tony, Eric and their friends dealt the Dickwits a good kicking, and relieved them of the weed, the cash due, a few flat-screen TVs, and all the Dickwits' driving licenses and passports. Tony thereby showed that he was not going to tolerate anyone screwing him over. Sadly, the Dickwits had not yet learned their lesson. A few weeks later, they called the police about the flat screens to complain that Tony and his friends had beaten and robbed them very badly, compounded by the fact that one of the Dickwits was at the time selling a rather valuable Seat motor car. There was no evidence, so the police took no action. Tony, of course, did. One of his friends contacted the Dickwit and arranged a test drive. Ensuring he was wearing a seatbelt, Tony's friend drove the car into the wall, wrote it off, and wished the Dickwit a nice day. This is how you deal with Dickwits. I'm not no violence. I'm appropriate level of violence. See, the Dickwits didn't get killed there, but they got taught a lesson.
Right, and like I said, like I've been trying to say, is there is a certain amount of violence, and I don't want to put it that way. There's a certain amount of legitimate interrogation methods that are used.
The guy's about to blow up a nightclub, so you're going to punch him in the face and say, "Where's the fucking explosives?"
Pretty much, that would be appropriate. It would be the same thing that you would deal. But the thing is if we have the person in custody, okay, we know, he is plotting
this. That's different
this.
from keeping them awake for a week.
Well, I don't agree with keeping them awake a week, but, I agree, some deprivation would make him realize, hey, wait a minute, these guys aren't playing games, but, to threaten the guy's family, I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that.
So if we're in agreement, perhaps, that there is some level of discomfort, obviously even imprisonment is a certain level of discomfort, let's have a public debate about what level of force is allowable. I mean, I was as a schoolboy, I got caned for disobedience. So is that defined by some human rights groups as a cruel and unusual form of punishment or torture or something? I was a bad boy,
and I think it's
on my leg.
Fellas, I think it's also important to point out. No, it's okay. I mean, I think it's also important, guys, to point out that nobody who released this report made the case that we simply allow these captives, and they're captives for good reason. They're there because they need to be there. But nobody made the case that we ought to simply sit there asking them, gosh, what sporting event would you like to watch on TV now? None of them made the case that we should not be forceful in our interrogations. They made the case that there is already an approved, vetted CIA handbook that is there because it's effective. The whole notion that nothing the CIA does short of torture is effective is ludicrous. That's crazy.
Arjuna, you want to weigh in on that?
I'm in agreement, really. There's a certain degree of something less than brutality and something more than kid gloves, which is appropriate. And if you look at the prisoner of war camps of civilized nations in the Second World War, not I believe Japanese prisoner of war camps, but American and British allied prisoner of war camps, I believe they didn't let the National Socialists, the Nazis, go and carry on fighting. They didn't imprison them without due cause, and they didn't mistreat them. Neither did they provide, I think, a comfortable environment for them. They provided a harsh environment. They were locked up without trial, and they were denied personal visits. Their minimal needs were met, and they were held for the duration of the war under the Geneva Convention. They would be asked if they had any intelligence. They would be interrogated. They would not be comfortable when they were interrogated. Interrogation techniques would be used, but they would not be tortured. I'm sure there was torture that went on by the Allies, obviously. I'm sure there's a lot of torture went on, but let's, if we're talking about what should we be doing, we should be like the Allied prisoner of war camps, that level of comfort.
But here, okay, let me interject something here. Okay, you're citing World War II, which is good. I'm not going to say it's not. However, we are in a undeclared war. Okay, basically that's exactly what the war on terrorism.
One side is declared, and the other is trying to accommodate still.
Yeah, but if it's an undeclared war, such as what we have as the war on terrorism, then would the Geneva Convention apply in an undeclared war status? And that's, I think, the primary focus of what is going on.
There was a lot of debate in the 80s about unilateral nuclear disarmament, and as an idealistic youth, that was actually the first political movement that I was involved with. And yet, we can really see in hindsight that it was a pipe dream. It's good to have an ideal of a world without nuclear weapons, but not when you have such dangerous people around. And so, it's similar to that, really, because what we have now is not unilateral nuclear disarmament, but unilateral non-violence in the face of the most deadly threat the world has ever seen, or at least it would be if it had technological advancement. It simply buys its death technology from civilized countries because all it can do is license other people to drill holes in its country, in the words of Suriana.
Jonathan, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
What I was going to say here is this. Clearly, some people in our audience, and in the audience of any radio program that would bring up these issues, and thank God we're the ones doing it, there are clearly people in our audiences who would say, you know what, in their gut of guts, they're saying, we don't give a damn how brutal we are because we can't stand these people. And you know what? If it doesn't really result in good actionable intelligence, that's okay because we just want to punish the people who threw down the towers. And we want to punish them hard and we want them to suffer. But you know what? I would say to those people, you've every right to those feelings. But if you turn it into policy, you are in fact unpatriotic. And why are you unpatriotic? Not because you're not holding their dear little hands. You're unpatriotic because your methods have been proven ineffective and you are not working. Your notion is not and has not been working to protect the United States of America or Great Britain or Spain or any other Western democracy that you claim to support.
A Western democracy, because the question is, who are we? You know, are we the European or ex-European whites against the Arabs? Is it a racial battle? Well, the answer is no, it's not. It's an ideological battle. And the ideological battle is not between the people of America and the people of Arabia, or the people of the West and the people of Arabia and the Muslim Ummah. It is an ideological battle, and it is between rationality and freedom, which includes the freedom to practice your religion peacefully, and free speech, and creativity, and entrepreneurship, and all that is wonderful about modern society in all its sci-fi technicolor wonder, and the tribal customs of a 7th century sand tribe who enforce complete silence, just as the mafia did. And so
that's right.
We are the forces of freedom, then we say we will comply with the Geneva Convention, even though you won't, because you are savages, and call you savages, and stop treating you with kid gloves. It's the kid gloves of speech that are killing Western democracy, not even so much the kid gloves of giving terrorists thousands of pounds because they were held 2 days too long without charge. No, it's the kid gloves of speech, of not calling this insane death cult for what it is, an instrument of Satan in sending people insane so they think the highest purpose in life is killing people who disagree with them one iota. What fools, what idiots, what closed-mind nincompoops to believe such utter rubbish. Aren't they stupid? And aren't they so seldom called stupid for the stupidity that they believe in? Because we must respect other cultures. We must respect the voodoo of some tribe in Africa or the Bahamas or the Caribbean that's poisoning people and calling people witches and practice demon cutting people up as a valid culture when compared with something like Christianity or Judaism or Vaishnavism or Buddhism.
Let me say this here, if in fact we're all in agreement that the kinds of ideologies that move ISIS, that move Hamas, that move Hezbollah, that move these movements are in fact not even meeting the challenges, the intellectual and moral challenges of the 9th century, if in fact we're in agreement that these people are not fit even for the 9th century, why on earth, why in hell would we want the United States of America, Great Britain, France, Spain, and Germany to mirror and copy their game plan?
Well, here's the thing. I
specifically refuse to debate theology because they say you cannot understand the Quran except in Arabic.
Okay.
A language in which, in 100 years, fewer books translated into Arabic than translated into Spanish in 1 year. That's how rich is the culture of the Arabic language.
All right, let me interject something here. You know, Jonathan brought this up earlier. in reference to 9/11. Jonathan had people that he knew that was in the Twin Towers. I had a personal friend on Flight 93. And the thing is when 9/11 occurred, we wanted revenge against those who were responsible. Thus, Bush, Cheney, and everybody got on the bandwagon of declaring, it was a undeclared, but I want to say a declared, undeclared war against terrorism. And, granted, we are fighting against a ideology of a belief system that's so antiquated, it's unbelievable. And yet those people are the ones that are citing that this is our right, this is what we have to do, we have to create a jihad. But my question is, since this is a undeclared war and we need to get this intelligence, and I'm trying to bring the group back to this, is that what would be in, and I'm gonna present this individually to you, what would be in your judgments the best way, other than just simply tossing them into a prison camp, to retrieve information we need to avoid another 9/11, another Benghazi, another Libya? How do we get this? I mean, without some sort of torture methods. Jonathan, let's get you first.
Well, okay, I think, again, before these torturers had their day and didn't get anything out of it, I think we really have to emphasize that it didn't do anything for us, these torture methods. But before these torturers had their great day in the sun, there was a handbook. There was a CIA handbook for interrogation. These guys are trained in interrogation methods. I've never read it. No one's ever shown it to me. But to suggest, for these people now, to suggest that the only way, the best way, was to do all these disgusting, horrible things is simply a lie. Because they had a handbook. They had methods that were working.
Arjuna, go ahead.
Well, yes. As I said earlier, the present efforts of the US and European and indeed worldwide police forces are somewhat effective and in stopping major terrorist attacks, except in the nexus of places like Syria, Iraq, and Nigeria, where they're clearly suffering from very poor security services and need to name Islam as the villain so that they can properly deal with those jihadists. But if you're talking about what is the most effective way to gather intelligence, I'd say it would appear to really to be electronic intelligence. Because as I said earlier, the splitting of jihad from being large operations, relatively large operations, like 9/11, the 7/7, the Bali nightclub, and so on, the jihadists are now they've stepped it up. We've now got approximately 1 9/11 a week in terms of the numbers of people dying, but these are being prosecuted by much smaller groups of 1, 2, 3 people. And those people, as they become orthodoxed and cemented in their views of jihad as being the ultimate goal of life, they are noticeable. They are publicizing their views on anti-social media. They are engaging in WhatsApps, Skypes, like phone calls, and they are being watched by the Western intelligence services, and that is working. It's obviously something where there needs to be a lot of research and development and ongoing changes, because it's a very rapidly changing thing. But if you go back to the reaction of the US after 2001, after 9/11, yes, it was completely understandable. America had been wronged as almost never before, and it went out on the attack, as you would expect really anyone to go out on the attack after having been attacked. So it was understandable. It was perhaps, though, not entirely wise, especially in Iraq, in the way in which it was prosecuted. There was some Al Qaeda needed to be attacked. And yet the wrong allies were identified in terms of countries like Pakistan, which was seen as an ally, and yet ended up sheltering bin Laden. If America had gone back to its Christian roots of love thy neighbor and been really contemplative about why 9/11 had occurred, it didn't occur so much because America is this terrible imperialist power, and it does have its abuses of imperialist and capitalist power in its corporations. But if it went back to its Christian roots and said, love thy neighbor, it would have said, well, the worst victims of Islamic terror are actually Muslims. So what can we do for Muslims to fix this Islamic terror that's going on? If Bush had simply said, well, I'm no theologian, let's get a load of philosophers and theologians and tell them, empty your mind of all preconceptions, go and study why these guys are doing what they're doing, and come back with me with some solutions with no preconceptions. Just go and analyze the problem. You're all eggheads. Go and do it. Why not? You know, it might be beyond the intelligence of a president of the United States who's got a lot going on, to be honest, to be an expert, world-class theologian on top of all that. But he has the power to assemble the best of the best and say, go and work on the problem from an open-minded perspective. That's all we ask. It's a very simple degree of common sense.
Okay, but here's the thing, too. Yesterday, for all those listeners that missed it, we had IQ Al-Razuli on, and when you brought up the fact of the moderates, it's always been IQ's position that there is no such thing as a moderate Muslim, that they're always going to fall back onto the tenets that are dictated in the Quran. He said it right specifically. How do you change?
Muslim leaders have said the same thing. The president of Turkey said it recently. I think the Ayatollah said it. Khomeini. They all say, you know, you're either Muslim. It's either Islam or not Islam. Because the thing is, in the Quran, it itself references it's not possible to change anything. This has all been given by Allah, and you take it verbatim. You cannot change it. You cannot debate it. You cannot modernize it. It's like this. It's like. Well,
you know, let me say this.
Can I just very quickly? It's like Basil Fawlty having difficulty with Manuel, the waiter that doesn't understand English in his terrible hotel. And at the end, he's so exasperated, he gets Manuel in front of him, and he goes, Manuel, let me explain. It's like this. And then he just pokes him in the eye.
All right, Jonathan, you were going to say something?
I take that point, and the Fawlty Towers reference is excellent. But I also want to say this, you know, regarding IQ Rasuli, what he wants fundamentally is for Islam itself, by the Western democracies, to be declared not a religion, but a terrorist organization and an ongoing criminal conspiracy. So, and what would be the effect of that? The effect of that would be that you wouldn't be You wouldn't be shutting down cultural centers or mosques. You would be shutting down parts of criminal operations, the way you shut down a casino when you know it's run by the mafia. What I think IQ, and that's clearly what IQ wants, because he agreed with me in my articulation of what I heard him saying that he wants. He agreed with it. But I tried to get across to him, and I think what Ed Till even more forcefully tried to get across to IQ is that is simply not the way a Western democracy can work.
Exactly. You know, the thing is you both are bringing up some very, very good arguments here. You know, but you know, here in the United States, you know, as in other countries, we have a set of laws, and number one is the basic law that our whole country was built on was the Constitution. And and I emphasize this time and time again about the First Amendment in reference to the right of freedom of religion. And it is that particular few words that all of these organizations here in the United States are going to fall on. They're going to say, no, this is our right of religion. and to declare, as Jonathan's asking, to declare that Islam would fall under the RICO Act, which is saying that you're a criminal activity. You're going to tell all these mosques, you're going to be telling all of these people, look, we're shutting your doors up. That's feasibly impossible given our current legal system.
Okay, listen, it's completely impossible to do that next week, but it's not impossible to start debating it, because the thing is, this whole mafia cult survives on being the ultimate victim. Muhammad himself was the ultimate victim. He was an orphan. He got passed from pillar to post. He had a very hard childhood. He was more or less an abused child in terms of victimhood and poverty and cruelty by his guardians. And so he carried this through into his religion and his movement, so that it would always be the victim. When it attacked the Quraysh or Jewish or Christian tribes, it was because they were persecuting the poor Muslims. It was forever recruiting from the poor and dispossessed and, like Muhammad, illiterate and criminal, because it gave them a place to belong in the family. You know how they're all called brothers? They're all called brothers because it's a family, just like the family they established in Sicily. The prototype of the Italian mafia are the Arabic mafia. It's the same family, and it works through victimhood. So we need to change the terms of debate. It's not that Muslims are victims of Islamophobia. It's that non-Muslims are victims of Islam. And if you think non-Muslims are victims of Islam in America, you ain't seen nothing yet. You try being a Christian anywhere in the Middle East apart from Israel. You try being a Christian a lot of places in Africa, especially North Africa, and you find out how easy it is to be a Christian in those Muslim countries. And then you understand who's the victim and who's the aggressor.
Okay.
And when we move the debate on from this Islamophobia...
And what Arjuna is saying now raises for me this, and that is, it's just blackly hilarious. It's darkly hilarious to me that given all of that, people can actually, with a clear-eyed stare at you, say, oh, Israel's the problem in the Middle East, which is such a joke.
I hate to do this, guys, but we've only got about a minute to go here, and I do want to carry on this conversation again, but it'll probably be after the holidays, and I do want to get you both back here for it. But in the last about 2 minutes remaining, Arjuna, I'm going to throw this question out, and I'm going to get your opinions, okay? We've covered a lot of subjects. We covered religion, we covered the intelligence gathering, but I want to kind of bring it back and close on the note of the intelligence gathering. In your opinions, in about 30 seconds each, what would be your hope to come out of this CIA report?
Well, my hope would be that the CIA and the Senate Oversight Committee actually work together to make sure that what we do in the field has the design that it can protect us, because it seems to me that what the report says is everything that went on that is highlighted in the report was really not designed to protect us, but just to make the architects of it feel good.
Arjuna?
What needs to come out of this report is a statement from the very top, from the President, and acknowledged and ratified by all other tiers of American government and indeed NATO allies, is that these actions are completely counterproductive and unacceptable, that NATO, or the Free West, represents freedom, and we abhor these tortures, and we will go forward on the basis of the Geneva Convention, and we will acknowledge the declaration of war by the Islamic State and treat its prisoners of war accordingly.
And with that, guys,
one final thing. There's an anti-Islam activist, Imran Firasat, in Spain at the moment, in danger of being deported to Pakistan. And if anybody can please look up Imran Firasat, he makes some super intelligence about Islam, which is what we really need.
all right. And with that, everybody, you know what time it is. It's time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, Ed Till will be with you all the way until 4 o'clock. Until Monday, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.